I mean, nostalgia is a hell of a drug, guys. People don't like change, and Critical Role over time is just naturally going to change in many aspects. And I can see why a lot of old school fans, or maybe fans that got in at the beginning of Campaign 2, may not like this as much because, yeah, there's a lot of differences. Like we said, it is kind of funny that all of a sudden the pace has picked up. We've got so much more information on the events going on in the world and the big baddies that are coming and the big bad events that could potentially happen. Yet people are still unhappy. Haters are going to hate, fans going to fan. At the end of the day, we probably should just stay off Reddit, shouldn't we? So the other day after Critical Role Campaign 3 Episode 39, I took to Reddit, as I often like to do, to see the fan bases and the community's reaction to the madness that took place at our table. Little to my surprise, did I see a bunch of complaining about the recent episode. Today on FraudOnTheTele, we're going to be talking about a lot of the complaints that people have had with Critical Role Campaign 3 yet again on this channel, and we're going to talk about some of the merits of them, and exactly what I think about Critical Role Campaign 3, and a lot of its issues, we'll say, going so far. As always, if you enjoyed the video, learned something new, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to check out some of our other Critical Role content. And let's just get into the video, shall we? So like I said, I took to Reddit this weekend to take a look at the community's reactions to Campaign 3 Episode 39, an episode that I felt like was a bit of a cool down from our recent crazy events, especially after our Campaign 1 crossover. So I thought, you know, maybe it was just a bit of a tame episode, but I didn't expect to see the fan base up in arms. And up in arms, a lot of them were. Now, before we even get into the critiques, this is just naturally going to happen with a fan base as big as Critical Roles or just any big fan base in general. There's always going to be people who are upset. There's always going to be people who are, I guess we'll say, flip-floppers, people who just never seem to be satisfied. There's no pleasing everyone. So to start that off, this is just an inevitable thing that you'll see, especially in Critical Role Reddit and Critical Role Twitch chat. There's always going to be people complaining. Sometimes their criticism and their complaints are valid. A lot of times they're just being drama queens. Seems, though, that a bunch of the community were coming together in agreement on the difference of Campaign 3 to 2 and 1. Now, this is obvious. These campaigns are naturally going to be different. They're telling different stories. The group are growing as people outside of the game, so things are going to change, and Matt is just going to run stuff differently sometimes. The biggest complaint that I seem to see repeated was that Campaign 3 does not feel the same as Campaign 2 and 1 in how the players interact with one another in character, how their relationships in character in RP have developed, and a mysterious lack of one-on-one interactions delving into these characters together that we've seen in Campaign 3. Now, straight up, all this is pretty valid. We really haven't gotten a ton of one-on-one character development interactions, especially when you compare it to the events of Campaign 2. We need to remember, though, that we're only in episode 40, and it seems like a lot of this is probably going to come later, post-Apogee Solstice, if I had to guess. But this whole timer kind of aspect of Campaign 3, whether it was the search for Armand Treshy and what kind of felt like a rushed, needing to be rushed series of events, seeing as they're on a bit of a time crunch, following up with another time crunch right after in the upcoming Apogee Solstice, it really just feels like, according to these people at least, the cast are taking their directions as a character less away from this one-on-one RP and focusing more on pushing towards this narrative point, I guess, as quickly as possible. Now, I have no idea if this is an actual intention that the cast are doing. I will say, though, that I think a lot of this criticism is relatively valid. Personally, though, I don't think this takes anything away from my enjoyment of Campaign 3. Critical Role has changed dramatically from Campaign 2, and especially from Campaign 1. This is a massive business now, guys. These guys are pumping out so much content. It's not just a Critical Role meet at the table once a week. There's so much stuff going on. This is a big business. The cast have a lot of responsibility now, and this is a huge money-making franchise for them. It wouldn't surprise me that a lot of kind of the nature of the game was going to shift because of this. I mean, we got to remember that a lot of these people are first-time parents now as well. Things are just going to change somewhat in the game. What doesn't change, though, is the absolute skill and the acting ability of those at the table, their friendship with one another, and just the fun and the character dynamics that these people are able to put on for us, the audience, and do with each other. Yes, unfortunately, we haven't gotten as much one-on-one interpersonal roleplay as I personally would have liked, because the interactions between in Campaign 2 were super, super good. It was a kind of a hallmark of Campaign 2, even a hallmark of Campaign 1 in many facets, even though I think Campaign 1 you can't really compare to 2 and 3, seeing as it started, at least like on screen, you know, midway through it. They'd already played for years beforehand before it even got onto our Twitch screens and then onto YouTube or wherever the heck it is you watch. Critical Role. A fair comparison for Campaign 3 would be Campaign 2, because we saw it start from 0 and go all the way to episode 140, whatever it was when it finished. This is another thing to think about here. Campaign 3 has a lot of very unique elements to it, different from Campaign 2 and 1. I mean, what other campaign started with 1, a guest character, and 2, a temporary player character? I'm talking about Travis here and Bertrand. These are very unique ways to start off a campaign. As well, the type of characters that are in Campaign 3 don't really seem to lend themselves as much, maybe, to this interpersonal RP. Our cast in Campaign 3 and the characters that they chose to play are quite a quirky Chaos Crew bunch. Well, then there's Orem. Even Orem himself is a bit of kind of a stone wall at times, and while he's the voice of reason, it's not like he's an open book on his feelings or even like a lot of his interpersonal situations and backstory. I mean, really in Campaign 3, the only like, I could say, fleshed out relationship right now within the cast's characters are Imogen and Laudna, and a lot of that is really just because of the fact that they themselves were intertwined with their Session 0 and their character kind of backstory. They've known each other for the longest out of everyone else, so they're going to have the most kind of fleshed out story, and they've just had a couple of story beats that were just kind of lend themselves to this interpersonal RP. It does surprise me that Liam's character Orem and Ashley's character Fern aren't more kind of connected. There isn't more interpersonal RP, more one-on-ones given to us, seeing as they were characters that were together in Exandria Unlimited before, right? And then came into this party. So I do find that very interesting. As well, like we said, the introduction of Robbie and his character as a guest character at the start of the party and then eventually leaving, I think did a lot to the dynamic of the group, as Robbie's character was in a lot of ways kind of the face, you could say even the leader, but he definitely was not the mediator per se, but kind of the social hub. It was just in the nature of his character, and I think Robbie, as a newer D&D player, his pure kind of joy and excitement, I think, carried a lot of this kind of small one-on-one interpersonal RP in a lot of senses, and so his absence is pretty sorely noted when you look at kind of how the characters interact with one another. A lot of the community seems to blame kind of this a lack of interpersonal roleplay, one-on-one roleplay, with the focus on the Ruidus arc. Once the Ruidus arc and the Solstice were introduced, it seems like the campaign has become way more of a straight line, which would make sense, right? This is a thing that's on a timer. They had 30 days when they first learned about it. 30 in-game days. That's like around, 30 to 15 sessions, depending on how many days per session, essentially, right? So in many ways, unavoidably in character, they're kind of forced to focus on this story. But I will even say, in episode 39 in question, there was a lot of moments where it felt like they did just kind of gloss over potential personal RP conversations that could have been had, and we know that the characters wanted to have, but for whatever reason, they just didn't have them. I'm thinking about the time spent on the airship. Now, personally, while I would like to see this roleplay, I think it will eventually come. For whatever reason, whether it having to do with this narrative focus, it seems very much like they want to hit this Apogee Solstice point maybe as soon as possible, or as soon as Matt will allow them to, in order to kind of greater develop what is going to happen in this campaign, because in my opinion, in my theory, it seems very much like this is a kind of Final Fantasy situation where the end of the world, in a sense, is going to happen at the Apogee Solstice, and then the rest of the campaign is going to be the kind of group's response to it and trying to refix this problem in this new crazy world. Now, we really have no idea, but I do think that the game and maybe the interpersonal roleplay and the kind of the connections within the party is going to change a lot once we get past this Apogee Solstice point. One Redditor comment that I felt was kind of funny, but honestly insanely accurate, was it felt like EXU Calamity was able to develop their characters and their personal relationships better in 4 episodes than Critical Role has done in like nearly 40. Now, maybe this is a bit too harsh, and EXU Calamity was in itself a very special piece of D&D media, in my opinion, and obviously they did a bunch of prep beforehand to kind of develop this interpersonal relationships. It is kind of telling, because that post did ring true to me. It did feel like in EXU Calamity we got more interpersonal RP moments in, 4 episodes, each around 4 to 5 hours long, than in the 40 episodes of Critical Role Campaign 3 so far. Now, we've talked about the problems of Campaign 3 a decent amount on this channel. If you haven't seen our other problems with Campaign 3 videos, the most notable one being the pacing issue, which is kind of a funny thing to think about, right? For the first, 30 episodes, 25 episodes, people were talking about how slow the campaign was, and then as soon as a timer scenario comes up where now the cast and the characters have a mission that must be completed within a time frame, so necessarily the pace would be quickened, people now complain about that. It just goes to show you you're not going to please everybody. Personally, I love Campaign 3. Yes, it is different from 2 and 1. Yes, there are elements of 2 and 1 that are much better than 3, but 3, in my opinion, has some of the coolest characters themselves as party characters. I love them all. Has some of the most interesting, diverse roleplay character backstory of any of the characters, in my opinion, and as such makes for a very interesting kind of character dynamic between the party. Yes, it's not as fleshed out yet, but to me that makes a lot of sense with who these characters are as people in many senses, as a lot of them have walls that are up, and as well, they're the Mighty Nine in many ways. These guys aren't the nicest of guys, again, besides Orem. I mean, FCG is one of the most complicated characters we've seen on Critical Role, and I love Sam for it. He's slowly becoming one of my favorite Sam characters of all time, and his interactions and his relationships with the party and watching him kind of learn, because in many aspects he's like a child, is fascinating to me. As well, I love the mystery of Campaign 3. It's really felt like something different from Campaigns 1 and 2, this whole kind of mysterious baddies lurking in the shadows. I mean, we barely even know our main antagonist at this point, and our main antagonist is just kind of a proxy for whatever greater threat is lurking within the moon and whatever the heck is going on with Ruidus. If you've been watching this channel, you know I've had a ton of fun with Campaign 3 theories, and I feel like this campaign and the story that they're going on, and as well as the linking in of Calamity stuff and all the greater lore going on, and I'm a sucker for lore, is all stuff that I love. Campaign 3 in many ways benefits from the fact that it is the third campaign. It is that it has so much more lore that is established now to draw from and play on. Now, maybe this isn't your cup of tea. Maybe you preferred campaigns 1 and 2. I mean, nostalgia is a hell of a drug, guys. People don't like change, and Critical Role over time is just naturally going to change in many aspects. Matt is not the same DM he is now from when he was, all the way back when Critical Role started, 7-8 years ago. The guy has grown. He's better now, I would even say. He's picked up a lot more elements from other great DMs, as well as he's lived and learned many lessons from having been playing D&D live and recorded for freaking years now. At the end of the day, you can't please everybody, especially in a show like this. I do think we should be allowed to criticize Critical Role, and there should be a space for that, and that's completely fine, as it's the same as watching any other show, watching my favorite anime. If you can critique it, and the critiques are valid, and maybe you're not a dick about it, then yeah, go ahead. I think that's completely fair. People are going to like what they're going to like at the end of the day. Campaign 3, I think, is a lot different from Campaign 2 and 1. I've been saying this for a while, and I can see why a lot of old school fans, or maybe fans that got in at the beginning of Campaign 2, may not like this as much, because, yeah, there's a lot of differences. And the differences are good in many aspects. Maybe people just think that they're bad because they kind of fell in love watching this other thing, and now all of a sudden they're confused because they're like, why isn't Campaign 3 a carbon copy of Campaign 2? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Do you think that the roleplay in Campaign 3, the interpersonal roleplay, hasn't been as good as in other campaigns? Are you attached to the party? Are you attached to Bell's Hells like you were attached to the Mighty Nine and Vox Machina by the time episode 40 hit? I do think it's kind of unfair to directly compare Campaign 3 to 2 and 1. All of these things are very different. I think that the pacing argument was very valid early on in the campaign. Even so, I still loved it, and I loved many aspects from it. But now, like we said, it is kind of funny that all of a sudden the pace has picked up. We've got so much more information on the events going on in the world and the big baddies that are coming and the big bad events that could potentially happen. Yet people are still unhappy. Haters are going to hate, fans going to fan. At the end of the day, we probably should just stay off Reddit, shouldn't we? As always, guys, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Stay safe out there. Peace, love, Adu.